Hello, Sacral Beauties. Welcome to the She Sacral podcast, where we focus on helping women recover from chronic burnout. If you're new, I'm your host, Lindsay Christian. I'm a holistic menstrual cycle coach, along with being a burnout recovery guide. So today we are diving in and talking about emotional burnout and how that impacts the womb, but also how your womb impacts your emotions. So there is a big feedback loop that we want to dive into today. So before we really begin, I want you to just take this moment to reconnect with yourself. Take a deep breath in and release. If there's any emotions that you've been holding, anything that has been creating disruption for you today when it comes to your emotions, just find a way to release that today. Know that you no longer need to carry that, and that you are safe and free to feel differently. Okay? All right. So now that we've taken that brief moment to reconnect, let's talk about emotional burnout. So emotional burnout happens when we are just giving so much emotionally, but those emotions are not being cared for or replenished. And so it can show up in so many ways. And one of the first ways is going to be overgiving and emotional overwhelm. So if you are constantly being the emotional anchor for someone else, the cheerleader, the peacemaker, having to carry the strength for everyone, or maybe you're holding space for others' pains, but you never really have the space to process your own. This creates compassion fatigue, and that's where the brain's empathy circuits and the part of the brain that this is connected to is called the anterior insula and the prefrontal cortex that literally becomes overstimulated. And so the body will then compensate for that by releasing cortisol and adrenaline in the body. And that actually dulls your emotional sensitivity to help you cope. It's like, this is too much and we're over giving. We are not having enough time and space for ourselves. Something that should just be a natural ebb and flow with empathy and being able to show up for others, something that's natural is just being overused. And that can really stress the brain out, stresses the body out. In the long term, when we have so much cortisol and adrenaline, those are our stress hormones that come up in our bodies to create an additional layer of protection. That will cause that emotional numbness, feeling fatigue, feeling apathetic, feeling like I don't even care anymore. Like, have you ever said to yourself when you are having compassion fatigue, whether you're just really having to be there for a group of people or someone else or someone in your family, where you almost feel like I can't care anymore. Like I care, but I can't care. Right? And sometimes we think our mind is just like, oh, I don't care anymore, but it really is a chemical change in the brain. And not only does this create that emotional numbness and flatness with your brain and your emotions, but this also will create hormonal suppression in the womb. And so the womb will actually start to produce less estrogen and less progesterone, which are the hormones that keep your cycles balanced and keep the womb healthy and all of that good stuff. So it's a very big deal that we're not really recognizing. And so energetically, the womb starts to feel dry, starts to kind of age a little bit, not because of our actual age or the hormones themselves, but from emotionally overextending yourself without replenishing. So that's the one side of emotional burnout. So if you've been overgiving a lot and you've just kind of trying to be there for everyone, this can impact you in ways that you may not be aware of. And let's be honest, as we age, who else is aging? For a lot of us, it's our parents. For a lot of us, we did not expect for our parents to maybe age the way that they did. Maybe they're ill. Maybe mentally something has happened. Maybe they're experiencing memory loss themselves, and that is very hard on you emotionally. If that is something that someone is going through, especially for women, because we tend to be, the nurturers and the caregivers of our families. And so if you're carrying that emotional weight for taking care of your parents as you're getting older, on top of that, if you have children, having to be there for them emotionally, it's a lot to carry. You feel like you've got to show up, you've got to be there all the time, and that can really wear on you. And if you have a child that is going through something very devastating, that is very heavy on you emotionally. And then you've got your own things going on. And if you work, right, you go to work and you're dealing with the stress of work. And so it's just like, where do you get this outlet? You know what I mean? So I'm with you. I am absolutely with you. And when you take the time to process that and how our emotions are impacting our womb, next up is going to be the second emotional burnout that we don't realize a lot of times. And that is going to be the emotional highs and lows, the hope and crash cycle. Oh, you know what I mean if you feel this, where you're feeling really hopeful, but then things aren't working and then you feel that low. I'm very familiar with this. And that emotional burnout can also create that instability, right? So being on that constant emotional roller coaster of hope and disappointment. And so when we attach our level of peace, our stability, our safety to outcomes, where it's maybe a job, or it's our partner, or it's a goal that we have, our brain will ride those waves of the dopamine spikes where we're excited, we pump ourselves up, we pull up all the motivation in the world that we can, and then it's not working out and you have to keep crashing, right? So it can feel so hard. And feeling those dopamine spikes and crashes has a huge impact on our brains and our bodies that we are not really recognizing. So dopamine is a neurochemical of anticipation. I know a lot of times people say, oh, it's like your feel good, it's your reward hormone. It's not. It is anticipation. It's the hormone that spikes right before you get something, or right before, right? When you feel hunger and you're getting closer to that food, that's when the dopamine actually spikes. It's not after. So when those expectations don't show up the way that we anticipated for them to, that dopamine drops very sharply. And so we can experience that emotional fatigue and feeling low motivation and feeling irritable. And when you are the one that's constantly having to prop yourself back up again over and over and over and over again, that creates a lot of chemical fluctuations that affect what's called your HPA-HPO axis. And that stands for H, which is the hypothalamus, which is your control center of your brain. P for pituitary gland, which controls the communication to your hormones. A, which is your adrenal glands, which is responding to stress. And then HPO, which is your hypothalamus, your pituitary gland, and then your ovaries. So your ovaries connecting to those as well. So it's this connecting piece to how the body is communicating in times of stress. And that can literally cause cycle irregularities and even mood swings. So our own emotions are then being reflected in every part of our bodies. So if this is resonating with you, know that that instability is a big thing. And we dove into the burnout wound of instability in our previous series. So definitely check that out, because even for myself, I'm very familiar with just having that instability and how much that can impact you. And also recognizing that when you're in this space of instability, what do you tend to do when we feel those highs or we feel those lows? We don't just sit with those, we react. Maybe we are feeling those lows, and to kind of boost those lows up, we tend to crave sugar. We tend to crave those carbs, right? Because we're trying to stabilize ourselves. And what does that lead into? We're going to get into that a lot later. So recognizing, wow, how I'm feeling emotionally is also impacting my choices and my decisions and my behaviors. And so for me, I always like to take a very holistic, empathetic approach to things and a deeper level of understanding, because I know the world is so loud with stop eating the sugar, stop eating the carbs, cut it out, do this, do that, work out more. Sometimes it just feels like the world is shouting at you instead of really giving you a space to actually heal and slow down and take care of yourself. And so that's why I created the Pleasure Wire, which is a beautiful community where you actually get the opportunity to learn on such a deep level what is going on in your body based on your physical symptoms and how to really look at it from a very holistic view, but also have a full support system with what is actually going to bring your body back into balance hormonally, physically, emotionally, and mentally. So if that is something that you are needing right now and you're going through any kind of burnout and you're a woman, that is the number one space for you. So click the link down below and it will take you right there. So we go through those highs and lows, and over time, the body becomes desensitized. So again, it's not that you don't care, but your nervous system is truly trying to protect you from those extremes of ups and downs. And so we have to learn how to regulate that hope to feel desire without destabilizing your body's chemistry. That's going to be the big thing that we're going to have to learn to do. So that's our second form of emotional burnout. And now I want to go into our last form of emotional burnout, which is going to be carrying those old emotions, feeling the resentment, feeling the bitterness, feeling the anger. And this happens when those emotions are unprocessed. And so when those unprocessed emotions don't disappear, what do? They recirculate back into our brain. They recirculate as hormonal loops as well. The limbic portion of the brain, which is really our space for like emotions and stress and anxiety and how we process all of that information. We have our center part called the amygdala. That stores emotional memories. If those emotional memories have not been processed or integrated properly, then guess what? The brain will keep re-triggering them whenever we feel stress. I'm just going to paint a picture here, right? Because I know we hear all these like technical terms. It's like, what? Just talk to me like a human, right? So let's say, things are just not going right. You're in traffic. Somebody cuts you off and you're like, what the heck, you a-hole? Why did you cut me off? And then you think of a person that is really annoying, right? Let's say Johnny at work is so annoying. And my job just really... You see where that goes? You see where I'm going with this? I like to keep everything, nice and calm and positive. So I'm just trying to give you an example of what that looks like played out. And it can go on and on and on and on and on, right? And so this can create a pattern in where your body will replay that emotional charge. And sometimes that charge is anger. Sometimes that charge is resentment when we really haven't let something go and we keep refeeling that feeling again. That's what resentment means. Resentment comes from the Latin word resentiment. Sentiment is like feeling, and means again. So to feel again. So that means that it's not processed. Or even when we carry guilt and that situation is long over, it keeps resurfacing in the body. So physiologically, this constant replay will actually keep your cortisol elevated, our stress hormone, cortisol. And cortisol depletes one of our womb hormones called progesterone. which is really important for helping us to feel calm. It's like a natural antidepressant. It also is responsible for our fertility as well for the first couple of months. And so it also tightens the pelvic muscles. Is a protective reflex. Our pelvic muscles are really important because they get activated at times when we feel fight or flight or when we feel stress as a way to get ourselves in gear to then run away. That's kind of like our body's natural response to things. And so even if it's just in our minds, the body's going to have the same reaction. And so that womb starts to mirror that stuckness, that stagnancy, and that can look like irregular cycles and irregular bleeding or pain during ovulation, or feeling a lot of inflammation or pelvic tension, or sometimes that can even lead to, when our progesterone is lower, that contributes to estrogen building up more tissues in the womb as well. And so therefore, when we have a lot of tissues in our womb, the body works really hard to clear that out, and that's going to create even more intense cramping. So there's all these layers that's connected. A lot of us are not connecting those dots where we see ourselves as so segmented and so separate, but it truly is connected. And so energetically, resentment keeps you in that pattern of holding. And so when we're in a holding pattern, we're holding on to all those old feelings and those old emotions. We're not really able to receive the nourishment that our bodies really need because our energy is so locked up in the past. And so when we think about emotional wellness and healing emotionally, this is not about feeling happy all of the time. It's about being emotionally honest with yourself, and it's about caring for those emotions. And emotional honesty means that you are allowing yourself to really name, what you feel and how you feel. And sometimes that looks like yelling it out or saying it out loud or talking it out, or sometimes it's writing it out. It all depends, I believe, on how safe you feel to express those emotions. And some of us have not felt safe to express ourselves emotionally. Maybe you've gone through something where, you express yourself emotionally, but then you receive a pretty strong reaction from that, or someone wants you to shut down those emotions because it makes them feel uncomfortable. So there's so many layers to this. When it comes to emotional care, that means that we're able to give space to those feelings. We're able to move through those emotions, whether it's through breath, through rest, through having support, through creativity, through practicing a routine or special intentional rituals that you do with yourself, whatever that looks like to you. Because when those emotions are processed, then we have our parasympathetic nervous system, which is really our healing nervous system, right? Our nervous system is in two spaces. It's either in survival or it's in peace, to be honest. And so that parasympathetic nervous system is the space of peace, where our food finally can digest, we can finally relax, we can finally get deep sleep. Our breathing starts to slow down and it's not so accelerated. And so when that activates, we have more blood flow in our bodies because the blood vessels are relaxing. We are lowering the cortisol and we're stabilizing our hormones. So the more that you care for those emotions, truly, the more that your womb can regulate itself. That is what I wanted to talk about for emotional burnout and a little bit on how that impacts our womb. But now let's talk about that feedback loop. So the feedback loop of where the womb impacts the emotions. Okay, let's talk about it. In the womb, your ovaries produce estrogen and progesterone and a little bit of testosterone, right? And so estrogen really does have a very big impact on the brain, particularly going back to the limbic system, which is the emotional part of the brain. And when our estrogen is balanced, that is going to enhance stable moods, emotional connection, and empathy. When our estrogen can get too low, which can happen during times of feeling PMS or even postpartum, when all those hormones drop, or even through menopause, we can also experience very low serotonin, low oxytocin. And serotonin is what is responsible for helping you to feel nice and calm. And oxytocin is like our love hormone, what helps us to bond and to feel close to one another. It can lead you to feel emotionally flat or just really feeling very sad. And this hits home for me a lot because, I don't think that this is looked at enough, especially for women. At times of dealing with, say, PMDD, or when women are really struggling and they're under a large amount of stress, we would normally have the hormone progesterone, which happens after we ovulate, which would help us to feel at ease. It would help us to feel calm. When we don't have enough estrogen, it's likely that we're not going to experience too much ovulation, which is therefore not going to give us the progesterone that our bodies need. But in that starts to create opportunities that can make you feel very, very depressed. There's been so many studies that actually show that sadly, when women are going through times of perimenopause, they're very likely to be so depressed that they may no longer want to continue with life. And so it's something very serious that I don't think is being taken seriously. And, women are here, hormone balance, this and that, but it really does impact you so much more than just your womb. It impacts your whole entire sense of being. And so that's so important to me because I know even for myself, I've had so many dark days and thoughts myself when now realizing that I really, was not taking the very best care of my body. I was under a lot of stress and I didn't realize what was going on. And so when that estrogen gets too low, it makes it so hard for you to feel calm and at ease. Now, on the flip side, when we have too much estrogen, which is also very, very common, this can create emotional overstimulation. So it can create a lot of anxiety. It can cause for you to be very irritable. It can cause for you to cry very easily when estrogen is really, really high. And so when we have chronic stress, that really starts to block that proper estrogen metabolism in the body. This leads to emotional misfiring. And so that can start to create some of that unpredictability or just feeling emotionally very off and all over the place. That's the impact that the womb is now having back onto the emotions. And so it just creates this constant feedback loop that a lot of women are struggling with. And so again, going back to the community in the Pleasure Wire, I do teach you how to begin to regulate that misfiring and work with your body and work with, resetting your nervous system as well as feeding your body properly to help support those hormones. So let's talk a little bit more about how the womb and brain communicate. They communicate through hormones, which we've talked about, and also the vagus nerve. Now, your vagus nerve is your largest nerve in your body, coming from your throat all the way down the spine, connecting to your lungs, your heart, your digestive system, and your womb, along with other organs. You can think of it as the broadcast system in your body. So when you feel stressed, that vagus nerve will then send a lot of messages to the rest of the body as well. And so this is why in meditation, when people stimulate the vagus nerve and they hum because it's in the throat, or taking deep breaths, is so important. But on a deeper level, expressing those emotional truths through your voice or singing lets the body know that you're safe as well because it's tied to joy. But on the flip side of that, when we are angry and we're screaming and that vibration in our throat and our vagus nerve is felt and expressed, that is also impacting us as well. And so when that womb is nice and balanced, that creates the calmer emotional brain. And that improves that emotional regulation. So holding in all those emotions is just not the way to go, even though we may not know how to release it. And so when we're feeling that stress, that creates more pelvic tension and poor circulation in the body, and that signals back to the brain that the body is just not safe. And the consistent and persistent emotional burnout symptoms keep happening. And so this is why women feel that mental clarity and emotional warmth and creative flow after doing a lot of womb healing practices like massage or resting or having some emotional release. Sometimes we judge those emotions as well, right? Sometimes we feel guilty for the emotions that we're having, or we just overthink them, and they're just emotions, they're just feelings, they're just there to give us deeper insight into what we're thinking. If you have a thought and you feel that negative emotion, what is that emotion really trying to tell you? Is it trying to get your attention to release that thought because that thought is no longer serving you? Right? Notice that the emotions don't feel good. So a lot of times that's a cue to say, does this belief that you're holding, does this fear that you're holding really support you? Sometimes it's like, hey, when we feel anger, that lets us know that a boundary has been crossed, right? So sometimes it's really just there, not for us to judge or trap ourselves in more, but to really look at them and say, okay, what is this telling me? And how can I move forward? So that's the other big part of emotions that I wanted to bring up. When it comes to healing those emotions, it's not about fixing them, but it's about learning how to feel safely again. Emotional release helps you to reduce that cortisol in the body and helps to restore healthy hormone communication between the brain and the womb and the rest of your body. So one of the ways that we can work with our emotions is through somatic healing. And so when I say somatic, it just means working with the body. So the word soma actually means living body. So not just as something physical, but something that feels and remembers. So somatic practices are just ways of healing through the body and not just thinking about it. Instead of talking your emotions away, moving the body, breathing through those emotions, using sound with those emotions, and feeling them until that energy is complete. That's how we know that we've completed the cycle of feeling the emotion. We've gone through the process, and now we can release it. We no longer need to keep feeling those emotions. And emotions are not just thoughts, they are chemical reactions. Emotions are chemicals. This is why they've been able to create medications for your emotions, right? And we feel differently because they are chemicals. And the word chemical means to process. So those emotions are not just only held in your brain, but also in your muscles, in your breath, in your womb, and your nervous system. Your body holds memory in everything. Think about it. Whenever you're feeling an emotion and it's really upsetting you, you don't just feel that in your mind. Your body feels it. Your shoulders tense up. Maybe your stomach gets a little nervous, right? It's a full body experience. And so when you practice something that is somatic, whether that's shaking or dancing or stretching or deep breathing or calmly touching the body, that is helping your body to release that the mind doesn't always have the right words for. So in a nutshell, it's just processing, healing the emotions through physical awareness. Okay, so that's one way that we can support those emotions. We can also do some womb breathing. So I do have a few videos here on the YouTube channel through different exercises that we do with the Pilates board. We do some womb breathing, which is really just breathing deeply into the lower belly to signal safety to the rest of the body. And then also the power of pleasure and rest will help your body to release the oxytocin and the healthy positive hormones that our body has, and that can rewire the feeling of safety in the body. But sometimes we have our own viewpoints on what pleasure is, and pleasure is not indulgent. It's just how your body rebalances chemistry after going through a lot of stress. And so I like to focus on those sacred forms of pleasure because we can do things that feel good but really aren't good for our bodies, right? And when I say sacred, I just mean something that's intentional to you. You're really putting a lot of thought into it. You're putting yourself into it. It means something to you. There's more meaning behind it versus just trying to feel good. It helps you to build a relationship within yourself because it's important to you. It's like having a slower morning routine or taking a nice, deep, relaxing bath that is just that time for you, whatever that looks like. Or maybe it's dancing where no one else is around and you're listening to the music that you like to listen to and you're moving your body the way you want to move your body. You're not dancing for approval or judgment or someone else's validation. It is strictly just for you. The next way is truly understanding that our emotions are not just feelings, but how we feel in our bodies chemically, with making sure that we have the right nourishment and the right nutrients and that we're getting outside and we're taking care of our bodies has an enormous impact on our emotions. And so by learning and knowing how to care for your body, what your body needs, as a woman, because that's the challenging part. There's so much out here that's truly actually tailored for a man's body, which is great, but we also need something that's tailored to a woman's body to be able to truly reap the maximum benefits of how we're really designed, because it is quite beautiful. So knowing the right foods that your body needs, the right exercises that your body needs, and being able to have community, being able to just feel supported overall just makes a huge impact, which is all available in the Pleasure Wire. And then the last way that I want to talk about healing and supporting those emotions is also going to be through creative outlets. That's huge. We're so creative as beings, even when we don't realize it. But whatever that looks like, I mean, just having a creative outlet is so helpful for giving a container to those emotions. And so we support all of that in the Pleasure Wire. So I would love for you to join. I think it would be just so beautiful for you if you feel like anything in this episode is resonating with you. So that's everything I wanted to dive in with you today when it comes to the emotions. Be sure to follow and subscribe. Up next, we're really going to dive in a lot deeper to the spiritual and energetic layer of the womb and what that can look like. Thank yourself for showing up today, and thank you for tuning in to the She Sacral podcast.